What I want to talk through is because your experience sitting as a consultant and building these plans, and then with Health Wallet helping reassemble them, is you probably got a pretty strong opinion of like, if you could build a perfect self-funded plan, what it would look like. And let's remove geographic limitations, size limitations, kind of if we had no constraints on building the perfect plan, like what would you do, right? So let's start at the kind of the foundation of any health plan. Let's assume they're self-funded, independent TPA, independent PBM. What does primary care look like in your mind? Let's start there.
Well, assuming that we've gone through the crawl, walk, run phase, we're running now. Destination,
we're flying.
Optimal.
Yeah.
I think that we've done away with the Buca rental network.
Okay.
That usually sits there because the HR folks are worried about the disruption that comes from
my doctor's out of network.
All that,
yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So it would definitely be a reference-based chassis for the catch-all.
Okay.
Right? I mean, unless you just want to totally restrict it and change the way that people access care to exclusively through, what we call the optimal care path. But like, I think ideally, just to catch all the oopsies, there's a reference-based chassis of some sort.
Okay.
There's a value-based provider arrangement in primary.
Okay.
So that's either an at-risk provider group, maybe locally, because it's pretty difficult to assume that you're going to have a nationally available value-based care arrangement.
Fair.
Right?
Fair.
So we'll call the first stop on the journey either a blend of direct primary care and value-based.
Okay. And value-based means that kind of the provider's at risk for performance, right?
Yeah, and there are ways to structure those contracts with the providers where they financially benefit by playing ball, right? Instead of doing standard fee-for-service, ring the cash register style primary care, when they are in an environment where they're sort of at risk, and I use that on the negative side of it, with upside on the positive side of it for just general population healthcare adherence, then they can kind of be the front door liaison between, when the member goes in for the first time for whatever they're going to go for, having a pre-auth and referral directive into care navigation, care coordination, whatever you want to call it, medical management, that then can deal with the heavy stuff.
Yeah, because that's primary care can function for a very large subset of like the healthcare delivery ecosystem, but mostly non-emergent, right? Not specialty care, things like that. And so I agree with your sort of basic premise of the foundation is some version of a direct primary care, a fee, monthly fee model. Value-based makes sense if deployable at scale, but may not be depending on where the population is.
Could be regionalized.
Could regionalize. You could have a virtual component. You should have a virtual access component as well. But then assuming, okay, now we've got something that a primary care physician cannot take care of. How do we connect the dots between that and the specialty care or something of the nature of like a pre-scheduled procedure, imaging, those kind of things?
Yeah, so you can catch all the traffic if you mandate that the plan goes through pre-auth, pre-cert, and the referral directives come to whoever your dedicated care coordination unit is. And then obviously, from there, you're getting into like, centers of excellence and bundled payments and maybe even a little flavor of medical tourism if there's some real incentive to do something somewhere else.
Like domestic or even international tourism, possibly? Right?
That might be on the hyper-progressive side of the continuum. But I mean...
But what's the goal? Is get them in the right place. Get them to a place with an optimal outcome, or at least an optimal probability of a good outcome. You can't guarantee it with a surgical procedure. And then cost, right? Knowing ahead of time as much as possible how much this procedure is going to cost the plan, and then incentivizing the member through plan design, waiving copays, things like that, deductibles out of pocket at all, potentially, so that they make that decision, right?
And I just feel like members, because of the way that you architect the plan, they're not going to interact, at least like in the aggregate at scale, they're not going to interact with care coordination prior to a primary care instance. They're probably just going to go to primary care. Now, if you communicate it the right way and incentivize them somehow, then there's a chance that they do. But I feel like, primary care and even unfortunately urgent care are sort of like the front line into the healthcare journey. So if you can have some arrangement where you can generally control what happens after primary care, meaning maybe cut it all off unless it goes through care coordination, who can then manage the heavy stuff. And, you know, that's really how you, because you're not going to, at least at scale, I don't think you're going to really change too much primary care behavior unless there's like serious incentive to do so.
Yeah.
And you can do that through either just making that the only option or, you know, by design, making there a strong difference in member responsibility, maybe like completely eliminated and making one higher than it would otherwise be.
Yeah, I think I've heard the term used tier and steer, right?
Yeah, tier and steer.
So tier. So you have like a narrower network that's the tier one network with these sort of pre-negotiated contracts and bundled surgical arrangements and things like that, with the waiving of the out-of-pocket for the member. They can still go to what you would call a tier two network or outside of that tier one, but normal copays and deductibles and things like that will apply. And then you have to have some sort of payment methodology, whether that's a wrap network or whether that's a reference-based pricing arrangement like you were describing, right? But how does a smaller employer on the continuum, they're probably they don't have the leveraging power to go negotiate a direct contract with the hospital system,
probably not.
Right? Okay. So you're saying a reference-based pricing arrangement sort of replaces their ability to maybe not be able to do that?
Or join an aggregate.
Okay.
Yeah, because I mean, for the same reason that, well, you know this better than anybody, the benefits of self-funding have come way down market as a byproduct of, you know, coalition style purchasing arrangements.
Captives, of course.
Captives and consortiums. And so I think that, you know, we were talking about this earlier, like localizing care. You know, there are organizations that do exist that are specifically there to negotiate between local employer groups, local community pharmacies, primary care. You know, I don't know that standard mid-size employer is going to get a direct contract with the hospital system, but there's a lot of, as you obviously know, like bundled payment and direct contracting organizations where you can kind of hitch your wagon there. Yeah,
and then what would you do though, like in the emergency situation? You know, that's the last step on that continuum, right? Like there are challenges in some locales or, you know, ones that don't really have competing hospital systems where they just won't accept reference-based pricing. They say, no, you can't, we're not doing it, sorry. So then what do you do, right? How do you solve for that particular problem in your mind?
Well, it depends on the concentration of employees, I guess, and like just the accessibility, because I used this example with you earlier. You know, I built self-funded health plans and am the co-founder of a healthcare navigation platform or benefits navigation platform. And I almost cut my toe off on my motorcycle and went right down to the most expensive private equity owned urgent care and paid $1,100 a stitch. You know, and so the consumerism part of the nature of the urgent stuff is, I guess, probably the last piece of the puzzle, because I didn't think at all about it, and I spend most of my waking life thinking about, you know, benefit navigation. So what we did in some scenarios, which I think is a kind of cool concept, particularly if we're talking about like on a geographic level with some relative proximity to one another, on-site shared clinics. We've seen even in like some urgent care environments, like some of our clients in Texas that were like oil field type risk profiles. If you engage the right organization or several of them are willing to participate in employer groups with some proximity to one another, you know, they can share a clinic and it could be an urgent care clinic. And, you know, that's assuming that there's enough proximity to make it there because, you know, there's a balance between immediacy and, you know, their ability to navigate. Yeah, in an emergent situation, you're just trying to do your best to get the care you need in that moment. That's right. And sometimes we feel certain situations are more emergent than they are, but in the moment you think it's the only thing I need to do is right now is go solve this. And so fair enough, right? You're not necessarily putting your consumerism hat on all the time in order to do that. And I don't think that should be the expectation because if life and death are at risk, we don't want you to stop and open your health wallet necessarily in a care navigation person. I would advise that they don't. I would advise they don't. Right? Like, is this what you call in and go, is this an emergency? Hang up and dial 911, right? Although I would have to use that as a case study if somebody still pulled out Health Wallet when they cut their toe off, you know, like that would be a prime member example. See, they were even able to do this. Come on, it's that easy. Yeah.
But so, and maybe it is a false premise, this idea of trying to design a perfect plan because every one of them is individualized to that employer's needs, right?
Yeah.
But what I'm really trying to get at is, if, like, broadly speaking, what is the construct that seems to work the best today across the ecosystem, regardless of some of those constraints? And so I think we covered a lot of them, which is independent TPA most likely is the foundation. Probably independent stop loss carrier if we want to go up a step and say, don't have your stop loss carrier have association with the administrator and association with the PBM, right? So let's carve all three of those core components out, pharmacy as well.
Network.
And then from there, be intelligent about how you design the continuum of healthcare delivery with primary care, bundled surgery, reference-based pricing, potentially if possible. And then the last part of this equation is, what do we do when somebody does go to the emergency room for a really catastrophic event and get this enormous bill that we know most likely has some BS built into that bill, right? So like, does auditing or bill review come into the equation for you as well?
I think in in an ideal health plan architecture, it certainly does. And it's not only on the front side, but it's also retroactively as well. So like claims audit and review. But, these organizations exist to try to steer folks to places where they've sort of already argued once and maybe reverse engineered into like a direct contract, but they're like, okay, you're willing to take that. Well, how about we send you people your way kind of thing? So I definitely think that, some sort of bill review is critical, but you got to determine where the optimal point is in terms of it being a cog in the wheel in the administrative process of the plan also, because a lot of TPAs are auto adjudicating claims under a certain dollar amount or whatever. And so, there are some out there that are focusing more on like specific maybe CPT codes or other things that are like areas of opportunity potentially.
That are maybe prone to fraud, waste, and abuse, like upcoding of kind of emergency codes, right? Those type of things, level 1 to 5, right? I had that firsthand experience, and I found out it's very common is to declare something more emergent than it actually is because there's financial incentive to do that for a hospital, right? So finding what those common sort of triggers are and being educated about how to like target those things, I think that's important.
And I think you can accomplish a lot of sort of like what it takes to wrangle in all of these cats if the care navigation unit is the brain trust of the plan. And so like, them operating under the guise of a member facing service unit, but like if they're the group that's executing on the plan level strategy and kind of doing the lifting on behalf of the membership and in terms of just like the onus of consumerism, you can accomplish a lot more as a percentage of total if the navigation unit is kind of in lockstep with the strategy folks. And then, how do you get members into that environment is, where I know a guy.
$1 trillion problem. Yeah, for sure, man.